Kuan Ying Lai Dao, Singapore. Selamat datang di Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Singapore. And good morning, everybody. I've just been speaking to the minister that I'm about to introduce, and she was explaining the significance of that extraordinary demonstration we've just seen. The idea is it's to help us calm our thoughts, get rid of evil influences, and the appearance of a dragon rather than a lion in Singapore means that this is a very special occasion. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the performing troupe. This is indeed a special occasion, and I want to welcome everybody to ICANN's 41st International Public Meeting. And it's great to be back in Singapore. And you might say it's a homecoming of sorts for many of us, because our very first international meeting was held here in Singapore in the International Convention and Exhibition Centre in February and March of 1999. In fact, some of you in the room today were at that meeting, as I was, 11 years ago. That very first ICANN meeting ran for all of 3 days. Committee meetings the first day, an opening meeting the next, and a board meeting to wrap things up. And 40 meetings later, that structure remains the foundation of our international public meetings. So, for those of you who weren't there, what was the first ICANN meeting talking about? What was the brand new ICANN community discussing in 1999? And some of the issues were familiar to you. The domain name supporting organisation proposals were coming in as to how to build what became the DNSO. We had a report from a brand new governmental advisory committee meeting privately because they weren't sure what their reception was going to be, and chaired by a rather tall Australian government official who we later came to know very well as our CEO. And a report from the DNS Root Service System Advisory Committee. But the community also came together to talk about internal ICANN policies and politics. Now remember, this was February and March of 1999. ICANN was only a few months old. There were nuts and bolts issues to be discussed and decided: how to hire people. We knew we needed more than we had. We only had 2 or 3 staff. We had to develop conflict of interest guidelines. We knew we were going to be having consumers and suppliers and providers and all parts of the retail and wholesale chain of the domain name industry in the same room making policy. So clearly establishing conflict rules was necessary. Finances were a terrible issue. We didn't have any money. We had a small loan from one of the major companies, and much of the first expenditure was financed by staff personal credit cards. Rod, perhaps we go back to that. I'm not sure. There may be some. So ICANN was taking its first steps on the international stage here in Singapore. And the domain name system itself was a very different place. There was all of 171 million internet users across the globe. What we thought at the time was a staggering number. 56% of those original 170 million users came from Canada and the United States. Just 15% came from the Asia-Pacific region, and less than 5% of the global citizen community was connected. Today, of course, over 2 billion users. Fewer than 14% come from North America as the technology is spread across the globe. 44% are from Asia. And so ICANN and the internet together have become truly global. Now our meetings run for full 5 days, and we start with 2 days of preliminary meetings. And I can tell you there's considerable pressure on us to extend that period, and we see meetings being added on at the front end and the back end. The staff and the board themselves come from all over the globe, as does the community. And the volunteers who drive our supporting organisations come from every continent except Antarctica. We've got offices now in 3 continents. And it's not just the people and the processes that are global, so are our issues. The internationalised domain name system is changing the address bars of the browsers accessing across the globe. There are now 30 IDNs in the route, representing 20 nations and territories and 21 different languages. And as we move forward, it will be more than just country code IDNs. Our new GTLD program will soon be the foundation of an internet that will make it possible for people across the globe to get their name in their language and script to make it their internet. And ICANN continues to collaborate with the CCTLD managers, with scientists and technologists and governments from across the world to enhance the security of this greatest shared communication resource of all time. Sweden was the first country to implement DNSSEC at the root back in 2005. Thanks to the combined efforts of registries around the world, the new security protocol will soon be available to the majority of domain name registrants in almost a quarter of the TLDs. And today, of the 310 top-level domains, 74 are signed, and 70 have trust anchors published as DS records in the root zone, meaning they're fully DNSSEC compatible. And what is it that makes all these efforts so important? And it stretches beyond the work itself. It's something greater than the goal of each of these individual initiatives. What's at stake, and what we're here this week to help grow, is the internet itself. Not merely the technical connections and agreements, not just the transfer of packets and megabytes. What we're working on is the most powerful tool for transforming our society that we've ever seen. So let me just step aside a little bit from that and talk about the place that we've gathered today, the Lion City of Singapore, because there's a hint in the story of this city about the possibilities that could change the internet. Let me refer you to a recent book, Physics of the Future. Respected American physicist, author Michiko Kaku speaks with colleagues at the cutting edge of various fields across the sciences. His goal is to predict what the world will be like in 1 century. And part of that prediction is based on what he calls the lessons of Singapore. Kaku delves into the story of this city-state, and thanks to a speech by Lee Kuan Yew, the Prime Minister of Singapore, from 1959 to 1990. And it was his vision that guided the independence and development of our host city and host country. When Lee first came to Singapore, it was famous, mostly as a backwater port known for piracy, smuggling, and as a stopping-off point for sailors. It was a city with no significant natural resources other than its people, who were, of course, hard-working and semi-skilled. And what he forged from that beginning was the 5th richest nation on earth. In a few decades, that nation was revolutionised through science, education, and a focus on high-tech industries. The workforce is now highly skilled, building, selling, and developing electronics, chemicals, biomedical equipment exported to the world. Of course, there were bumps on the road. Top scientists didn't want to stay here. There were no cultural amenities or attractions to be found. So Lee's government fostered the arts, ballet, symphonies, and the theatre, and the scientists stayed. And so Singapore today ranks among the top nations for science. So to me, what Lee and Singapore accomplished reminds us of the power of the internet and why we're here today. The internet now is the same tool that connects people to culture, to fellow researchers, to cutting-edge technologies. But it's not these things in and of itself, but what it makes possible for the creating, sharing, and adoption. And the miracle that happened in Singapore can happen the rest of the world over with the help of the internet. And that's why our work here is so important. Of course, it's poignant for me because, as many of you know, this will be my last meeting in my role as chair. What makes it significant is the work that we're going to achieve in the week ahead. We're going to be talking about how we can keep working together to make sure the domain name system is more secure. We're going to be talking about how we can unleash its potential to connect people in new ways thanks to new GTLDs. And we're going to continue talking about the internationalised domain name system and how we can spread that and continue connecting new languages, new names, and new people to the global internet. We're going to talk about many more things. After all, the internet and the work we support are enormous. So let me close by thanking you all here for coming here to help us with this important work and all that it may bring. And now, on behalf of the ICANN board, I welcome you and declare the 41st International Public Meeting of ICANN open. Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our official representative from the Government of Singapore, the Minister of State for Information and Communications, Ms. Grace Fu. In a speech last year, Ms. Fu said, "Man has always been driven to create innovation devices to improve his life. We see all around us how man's creativity has shaped our world." And we have to say, having come here, Singapore is the living embodiment of this idea. We're in one of the few countries in the world with broadband access readily available to just about any would-be user anywhere in the country. But that's not the end, it's just a beginning, because Singapore's Intelligent Nation plan is aiming to go further. They're building ultra-high-speed, pervasive, intelligent and trusted infocom infrastructure. They're fostering a globally competitive infocom industry, and they're developing an infocom-savvy workforce and a globally competitive infocom-trained manpower. So as Singapore's Senior Minister of State for Information and Communications, it's happening, Ms. Fu, under your watch. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming Ms Grace Fu to the ICANN stage. Ms Fu.